Broadcasting live from Youngville, North Carolina and Ontario, Canada. This is Got Mead Live, a weekly show where Vicky Rowe and AJ Aramutz bring you the mead news, meadery info, and mead-making discussions from all over, talking with mead makers, mead owners, industry mavens, and influencers. This is Got Mead Live, a weekly podcast about mead and the people who love it and where the mead world is going. And now here are your hosts, Got Mead owner Vicky Rowe and mead and wine maker AJ Aramutz.
Live from the den of the puppies of the apocalypse, Geelong down under because Hamish is changing things around. And today, New Jersey, welcome to Got Mead Live. Welcome to the show. Today we've got a guest host on with us. Sergio from Melavino Meadery is going to be on with us because we're going to be talking with Justin LeVaughn at Ethereal Brewing in Lexington, Kentucky, and he's into he does a lot of work with mead analysis and quality assurance and stuff like that. So us not being commercial mead makers and not knowing the behind the scenes stuff there, we thought it might be a good idea to bring in an expert to help us when we're talking with Justin. So Sergio's here with us. So all y'all know we do this because, we love it just like you do. But the software, the hardware, the storage, that all costs money. And we like to be able to upgrade to better equipment and better software packages. But again, money and more of it because this is actually one of the lesser costing solutions. Anyway, if you're not already a patron and you listen to the show, we hope you'll consider becoming one. It's only $30 a year. You get access to so much more on Got Mead. You get access to our patron forums and the award-winning recipes contained there, as well as a lot of advanced mead making talk. You also get into our patron boards on Facebook. So it's only 50 cents a week. You get all that. You're helping to support the show and the site to continue bringing mead information to you and the rest of the world. So we appreciate it. And thank you to those who either renewed or signed up in the last week. You are so appreciated, and I look at all of them. So thank you very, very much. So moving on. If you want to listen to us live, go to gotmead.com. And of course, if you're already listening to us live, you know this. But go to gotmead.com. Just click on Got Mead Live Radio Show, and that'll take you to a page where you've got a player. It's live when we are, and you can also listen to shows all the way back to the beginning through that same player. If you'd like to listen to us later and you're a podcast kind of person, check us out on Spreaker, iTunes, SoundCloud, TuneIn, and Stitcher. Just search Got Mead Live. Replays go back to the beginning of the show there. And you can also get them on the website as well. You can find us online at gotmead.com, of course, facebook.com/gotmead for our page, facebook.com/groups/gotmead for our group. Twitter, we are at gotmead now. Feel free to tweet us. I'm usually watching the feed during the show. You can catch us on Slack during the show live. There is a link on every single show episode page to our Slack, where you can come in and join us for live chat during the shows. And if you want to ask us questions, just put your mouse over Got Mead Live Radio Show on the site at gotmead.com, and there's a drop down there where you can select to ask us a question. Send us your questions, comments, suggestions of people you'd like to have like to see on the show. So just let us know. And if Skype is cooperating, which sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't, you can call us at 803-443-MEAD. That's 803-443-6323. Our guest tonight is Justin LeVaughn. He is the quality assurance and control person at Ethereal Brewing in Lexington, Kentucky. They do beer, meads, and ciders. And he's going to be coming on and talking about mead analysis and some of the stuff that he's doing. So I think it'll be really interesting. And so we've brought Sergio on to help us, as I said, so to be our in-house expert as far as making sure that we're asking the right things. So we'll bring him in here shortly. So Sergio, what you drinking?
Tonight I am drinking a bottle of our Dakota Clover. It's basically a high-end semi-sweet clover blossom honey mead fermented with a Chardonnay yeast.
Nice. I like Dakota Clover. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Hamish, what about you?
I'm I'm being a bit stereotypical American here and having a half gallon of iced coffee and 4 jam donuts.
That's kind of more stereotypical American cop.
Yeah. All right. Let's go with that.
Yeah. I'm working on a bottle of Zombie Killer right now. God, I love this stuff.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. This is one from one of Brad's stashes. He gifted this to me a couple visits ago. So, and it's been sitting there in my fridge looking at me. So I figured I better drink it. But yeah. So while I'm getting Justin on here, what new stuff you got coming down the pike, Sergio?
Oh man, yeah, we just filtered a ton of product today. We have our Midnight Jack and Murder of Crows coming back on Mead Day weekend.
Uh-huh.
And we also have, let me see, 2 other new releases that'll be that same weekend. We have a semi-sweet strawberry rosé piment. It's 49% grape juice with orange blossom honey, and basically it's added some fresh strawberries into secondary. It's really, really nice. And we also have an orange blossom honey mead aged on vanilla beans and oranges.
Ooh, well, I want some of that one.
Very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, we call that one Orange Juice Smooth.
I like that.
And then we got some draft stuff coming out that we've been playing around with. We got another big IPA mead coming out that weekend and a bunch of other stuff. I mean, there's always something new, especially on the draft side of things.
Cool. Trying to get Skype is being ridiculous again. Come on, you stupid thing. There we go. I think I'm going to pull him in on his mobile. Is it? Oh, sorry, I got the pronunciation wrong on that. You're just going to have to teach me Australian pronunciation, Hamish.
Yeah. That'll be a long course.
Yeah, I know, right? Justin.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome to Got Me Live. You've got me and Hamish in Australia, and I pulled in some big guns because I didn't know all that much about analysis and quality control, so Sergio's here with us.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I thought you might like that. Yeah, I just, it's like I'm a home mead maker. What I know about, like quality assurance on a commercial level is pretty small. So figured it'd be best to bring in Sergio. So, yeah.
Well,
I'm the
awesome.
Got Mead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's one of he's one of my pinch hitters,
Well, hopefully I will do you proud, Sergio.
All right. I'm counting on it, man. I'm counting on it.
All right.
I have standards.
Yeah. So, Justin, tell us a little bit about you and about how you ended up with Ethereal.
Oh man. So I kind of just fell into the brewing industry after college. So originally I had done some like formal academic training at University of Kentucky, and was employed there and worked in several labs as like a tech and a lab manager, and then went into education, teaching science, and then just kind of fell into brewing. A buddy of mine who works at a third-party control lab or quality control lab was helping out with one of the breweries in town, and he knew I was looking for a job, and he was like, "Hey man, they're looking for somebody at Ethereal," and that's how I kind of fell into the brewing industry as opposed to being a beer drinker. But so it mixed pretty well with what I'd been doing. Like I said, I've been a home brewer for, gosh, I guess ever since I could drink in college. doing it just to make, like probably everybody else.
Alcohol was expensive.
Yeah. Alcohol is expensive. I was on a budget, and I was like, well, I'll make my own. It can't be that expensive, right? And yeah, I've spent thousands of dollars on equipment, so that argument doesn't work very well. But anyway, so it was a fun little hobby, and then just kind of grew out of control from there. But yeah, I guess hopefully that's a good enough answer. But yeah, I guess it worked pretty well in the lab too, because I had worked in several cell biology laboratories, doing undergrad research, and then helping out with graduate research. So using some of those skills helped. And then for a couple of years, I managed the teaching labs at University of Kentucky. Anywhere from the genetics labs to the cell labs, and then intro bio labs. So picked up a lot of techniques along the way. But a big part of that also came from grad school, because I dealt with education research, so a lot of qualitative data, and that really helped building our sensory program out from there. At Ethereal, I have a train tasting panel that I've slowly built up out of our brewing community and home brewers, and we train them. I train them on different off flavors, and we do calibrations and regular sensory analysis of all of our core brands.
That's
so
really
that's
cool.
been a big part. Yeah.
How did you train them? Did you use how did you train them?
Well, first, so the guy who previously had the job, he had I guess contacts with a program called Draft Lab. It's kind of a new-ish kind of program, but more and more breweries are popping on it. But basically what it is, it's a mobile app that allows me to add people to my group, and I can aggregate all of their tasting data. So I don't have to manually input it into Excel.
Now that's cool.
So the first part of that process is we will. So I had to create rubrics, and I'll talk about the tests, because I do. It does allow me to do some statistical analysis. I don't do triangle tests on it, but I do a different type of statistical analysis called true brand, or if you look it up, it's called percent defect testing. And that's a way for me to measure batch to batch consistency.
Nice.
But kind of getting on tangents, but basically how I train them is first we start with more or less a rubric or targets, and they're all in criteria for like visual, aroma, taste, which in this case we're just talking about the primary tastants, sweet, sour, bitter, umami. I'm forgetting the other one, bitter, and then mouthfeel. So what we do in the program has a nice flavor map that when they made this program, they beta tested on a bunch of people and came up with a set of common descriptors. And this is the same type of flavor map that I think they use in Cicerone training and whatnot. So it's a pretty extensively tested flavor map, but it gives us a set of common descriptors that we can all agree on and all use. If you ever messed with qualitative data before, when you survey people on, what do you taste or what do you see, making sense of that data can be a nightmare.
Well, yeah, it's pretty subjective. That's kind of why I was wondering, is it's like, how do you calibrate their what they're tasting. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's,
So,
you know, I mean, I've been a judge for 20 years, and boy, it's subjective as all get out, you know?
oh yeah, we have those discussions, and like when I go to beer judging competitions and stuff like that. Yeah. But basically what I do is we will sit down together with a beer. So I guess as an example, so in my education research, we had to basically create a rubric to identify what students understood about what this question was asking based on their answers. So, you know, we create this rubric and we'd have 3 different evaluators, and we would basically all read a set of answers, and together we would evaluate that student response. And we would basically do it until we all came to a common agreement. So it's essentially what we do there. So we'll sit down with a beer. It may be like one of our Pilsners, and all of us will sit and we'll all, go through the different targets like visual. For that one, they all kind of talk aloud and all work. And then we'll go to the next one until we can come to a common consensus. And then we'll go to the next one, which is aroma. We'll talk about aromas, come to an agreement. And so we'll work through it that way. And so usually what we'll do is we'll work on one beer together. And then I'll have another beer. And then I was like, all right, so here's another beer. Let's evaluate it on your own and see if we can come to an agreement. And a lot of times, we'll sit there and ask, like, all right, well, who did not pass this beer on this criteria? And then we'll be like, all right, well, why did you not pass it? And we'll talk about it and then say like, oh, well, like, how do you evaluate clear? So we'll talk about like ways to evaluate clarity, or what's another thing? What's another common thing we talk about? Like mouthfeel, like or lacing on the glass. Like a lot of those subjective things, we'll try to come to a common consensus, and a lot of times we may not all agree, what's light lacing versus moderate versus heavy, but at least we'll have a general idea of what we're all talking about. It's hard enough getting 3 people to agree on the same thing. When you have like 10 to 18 people, yeah, it's impossible. You just kind of do the best you can and try to, at least you have a common language. And then you're all kind of using the same criteria to grade it, rather than just kind of using what you think applies. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
For a simple trick like that, would you like do something along the lines of a multiple choice, not a multiple choice, but in those questionnaires where they have very heavy, like very heavy, moderate, light, very light, and maybe average the response to get what you want, or do you just sort of go for what most people say, or how do you decide when you've got 18 different ideas what's the mode or what's the average, or what are you aiming for?
So usually we try to break it up in at least like 3s, like high, medium, low. That's the more choices you give, the more kind of what's the word? There's a lot of like variance, I guess, in between like light, heavy, or heavy, moderate. So trying to come up with discrete criteria, or discrete descriptors or criteria that they're evaluating on, so it's easy for them to distinguish, oh, this is light, oh, this is heavy. But as far as like how do we all come to agreement on that, when I'm doing, a lot of times we'll talk about it, but when we got 10 people doing it, when we first do this, I might do, this app has what's called descriptive testing. And basically you describe it and there's sliders. So when they evaluate it, they'll move this slider to high, medium, and low. And then when I look at the data, I can see as like a histogram what they evaluated it. And a lot of times they fall within kind of that middle area of the very simple bell curve. And then I can look at, well, who said this was heavy when 5 other people said low? And then I can say, oh, these two. So then I might say, oh, well, we need to go back and we need to talk about, what's heavy versus light. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah. So it's kind of multiple choice, but yeah, it's just, we'll kind of go through a calibration, and then I might do like a test run, or at least one test run, if not, 2 if I have the time, but at least one test run, or a lot of times I'll do it over an extended period of time. So maybe every tasting we might do one descriptive test, and that's kind of like my test to see if they're still within our parameters. And then I can say, oh, well, we need to go back and test, or we need to go back and talk about a couple of things, or recalibrate.
That descriptive test was what I meant by multiple choice. Yeah, when you give a score, and then you're obviously looking at them on a histogram and taking the mode as the standard rather than the average. But yeah, and a lot of times when I'm doing the calibrations, we'll do the first time when we're getting used to the program, we'll do like 1 or 2 descriptive tests, and then we might do a true to brand or true to target test, which that's a lot easier. Those tests, basically, it's basically a description of visual, of aroma, of mouthfeel, and then I ask them, does this beer match this description? Yes or no? And then they can say yes or no, and then provide feedback. Yeah, that's actually the biggest problem I've ever had with most competitions is the when you're judging a wine, you do it exactly like you've said. You have a look at clarity, you have a look at the bubbles, you have a look at the legs, you look at whatever is regarded there. Then you look at the aroma and everything like that, and you look at the palate. But overall of this is what they call true to style, so true to brand, like you're saying. So if you've got a Merlot, it's meant to look, smell and taste like a Merlot. We don't really have any standard definitions for true to style in the world. I mean, it's hard to get there, but if you get a plum melomel, sort of, we know it's going to have honey and it's going to have plums, but what is the style in a plum melomel? We don't have that. I mean, the Poles have it. They have their styles, and you can say whether the taste is true to style or not. But other than that, we don't really have any solid styles. And so how do you like with beer? I get it. There's styles, but more focusing on the mead and even the ciders to an extent. How do you do true to brand with something that's so ill-defined?
Well, for that, even with our beers, those descriptors or the targets that we make are basically specific to that beer. It's not, I mean, we make it within like a general style, but for what that beer should be, that's what we make the targets on. So if I'm doing something kind of nebulous like a mead or whatever, if I've got like my I guess I'm gonna use the one I'm drinking right now. It's so it's a lavender lemonade type mead, and I will make my targets based on what I'm going for, and then they would evaluate it on that, rather than like just the BJCP style guidelines, which are very they're general. And I understand like why they have to be, because they have to cater to a lot of different stuff in there. But yeah, these are specific to the actual mead that I'm making. And that's how we get around it, with different things like, we're trying out some ciders, or, well, I guess we're planning to do a cider. It's like, well, how do we, get it to a specific style? Well, we create them. So.
Yeah, I've always found that, it's really interesting, especially when you get into the mead competitions, like Hamish said, you got your traditional. So even in this traditional category, you have your different honey varietals, and you can have a better chance of comparing, one mead to another, which you're not really supposed to do anyway when you're judging, right? You're supposed to judge each individual mead.
Yeah,
as it is,
for what you have in front of you.
Yeah. And then when you get into even just the mellow category, I mean, then it's like it opens up so much more, because it's not just one honey varietal that you're comparing, right? Or at least thinking about. Now you're saying, okay, you got 3, 6 different fruits, right? Then open category just opens up even more than that. I've always found it pretty interesting, and especially in the mellow and open category categories in a mead competition, I've always seen that, and I'm pretty sure it's obvious to most that those are some of the hardest categories to place in, right? Because there's so many meads in there. I mean, you could have at the Mazer Cup, there was a few 50s thrown around at the Mazer Cup this year, and not every one of them won a medal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the competition's stiff when a 50 doesn't take a medal. But yeah, it's
like you're saying, they're.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, I was saying, like, they're equally hard. They're hard to place, but they're really, really hard to evaluate and to judge, because well, I'm not saying this in a bad way, but it's like nebulous criteria, but also like you don't have the strict criteria for a particular style, but you have to rely on what's declared. So if they declare it, then it should be there, in my opinion. So I try to, like, when I'm doing stuff like that, it's try to systematically evaluate it, just like with that true to target or descriptor analysis. If it's there, it's there. If you've declared it but it's not there, then
then you're in trouble. Yeah, I've always said that.
Yeah.
I mean, even Harvin said it a few times out on Facebook. It's if you have a mellow with 3 to 5 or whatever number of fruits in that one recipe, just declare the ones that you can definitely get, that anybody would definitely be able to pick out, right?
Yeah.
And same thing as well. Even with sweetness level, designating a dry, semi-sweet, or sweet. I mean, it's all subjective too, right? So, I've entered a 1040 final gravity mead into a competition as a semi-sweet, because with the acid balance,
it tasted that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So the more people get used to tasting their meads, evaluating themselves, and kind of getting more used to the different gradients of sweetness levels with the different balance of acid and tannins, it gets so much more complicated than just what's on paper, right? It's not all about the gravity, all about this or that. It's like you're saying, you basically break down each little aspect to that recipe that you want to target. And you're going to have to make sure that that's what a judge is also going to be able to pick up on it as well.
Yeah, and so one thing that we've done too, like if we have like new products or new brands rather that we're putting out, maybe it's like this new Berliner Weiss, or we've talked about doing a braggot. So what I would usually do also is I'll have the brewer write up a set of targets using the same language and the same format that the tasters see. And then I'll have them I'll give it to them blind, and, say, here, do a descriptive test on this. And then the next sample is like, okay, we'll do a true to brands using the brewer's targets. And then the nice thing about this program is once the data is aggregated, I can have the program generate targets for me. So it'll take their descriptors and put it into like a very, very general like paragraph, and I'll have to go back and edit it. But at least it like I can see like, oh, what did the tasters get versus what was he actually going for? And I usually do the same thing. Like when I enter a mead or a beer into a competition, I'll do that. I'll have like general targets, or more or less guidelines. This target's basically a guideline in this sense. So I'll have those guidelines written, you know, and then look for, you know, basically just overall, like overarching descriptors, and include those into the description when I'm submitting it. But also when I'm looking at feedback, I'll compare that written thing with what the judges are saying. And that'll tells me like, did they get what I was going for? Because in that case, it's perfect because they're blind. They have no idea about it, but are they getting what I want to get out of it? And as a home mead maker, if you approach it that way, that systematic way of, you know, approaching it will help with recipe creation, with, you know, and other things.
Yeah. Is that app, is that something that's basically a private or a public app?
I think it does have a free version. Let me look it up right here. It does have a free version that we played around with. I think it's limited in what some of the stats it'll do, but I think you can do like descriptive testing. They also did offer, so it's an ever-changing product. So they just added like a beta test for attribute training, so I can do off-flavor analysis on this program. But yeah, you can pay for it. And I was trying to find other programs that may be similar that would be more applicable to the wine world. But they're I feel like the actual flavor, in this case, they're using flavor as aroma as flavor. It's both, I would call it like ortho and retronasal type aromas, but it's a pretty, it's a lot of the flavors in there and how they have it grouped, I feel like would apply to mead, especially, and probably to wine too. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing with developing, sensory analysis for using like a tasting panel is like a common vocabulary. That's kind of a hard thing to do. Otherwise, you can survey your tasters and say like, okay, just write down what you taste, but then you got to take that information back and then try to interpret and make sense of what they said without inferring what they meant.
Yeah.
Which that's the hardest part. Yeah, when they say a word that, like, well, what do they mean here? And it's like you use context and then just got to take it face value. Can't try to suppose what they meant, which is, having that common vocabulary will prevent that, having to do that rather.
It's pretty interesting. It reminds me of the whole wine scene in China, right? So,
yeah,
most of the descriptors you would find, commonly used throughout the world, when you're talking about some wines, it's, some pineapple and, black currant and black cherry and yada, yada, yada. Well, these aren't familiar fruits in China. And so they essentially had to create almost their whole own vocabulary of theirs just to describe the wines and basically just create a whole alternate universe as far as the wine scene goes in the world. Just for
I remember that, and some of the flavors were
yeah.
really unexpected.
Yeah, Yeah, I always thought that was pretty fascinating. I mean, it's how do you compare?
One that I thought I'd never find in wine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've had to do that like with certain like flavors that I've seen in competitions. I was like, I've never heard of that, and I'm looking it up. Like, what is this flavor? And then some of the descriptors, I'm just like, okay, I'm still confused.
Yeah, we've had to do that with like certain honeys that nobody ever heard of too. So yeah, and that's going to get even harder now that they're banning cell phones in some competitions. So just like
that's unfortunate.
I know. Well, I get it.
The Google machine is my friend.
I know, right? I mean, I get it, but I also see where it can, where it's going to make things a little more complicated. Okay, so we got people asking, what's the name of this app?
So it's called Draft Lab. So let me spell it for you. It's DRAUGHT, like draft beer, and then lab, all one word.
Okay.
Yeah, I love this app, and I've been asking the guy, the rep, about like if there's other like cideries that use this, or wineries or whatnot, but they're slowly building it out. I'm trying. I had some stuff written down about who started this, and I was Googling the beer flavor map. So if you Google beer flavor map, it should come up in the like first couple of hits or the images. But that's, so they do use it for the Cicerone program. I'm pulling it up right now.
Yeah, I just pulled up their website. I'm going to link them on the episode page for anybody who wants to check them out.
Yeah.
Maybe we get enough mead makers, going, hey, this is really awesome. We really need for you to make this more about mead too. Thank you.
Yeah. It's very similar. It's basically the same thing as a flavor wheel, just in a different format. As long as whatever you're using, like you could use the honey flavor wheel or the wine flavor wheel for your descriptors for the panel. You just have to all agree on like what you're talking about and what you're using to evaluate. I like this, and it's the same format. Like you see there's bold head, there's like very general descriptors, and then there's like sub descriptors, and then they get very specific. So it goes broad to specific. So it's the same way you use a flavor wheel. You start at the outside and work your way in. But it does a nice job of breaking it down into like three different components. So you have your aroma, your taste, and your mouthfeel that all make flavor. And it's a nice visual aid. So even though the program has it and it's searchable, I still have the couple of these. I have one at the bar for the bartenders, and then I have one posted in the lab area, and then I have another one posted in the tasting room, so the tasters can use it like on the wall and stuff. So
this is really this is really cool.
Yeah.
Vicky knows how much I love apps. So.
Yeah. Sergio and I have spent like 2 hours over the last 2 days going back and forth on a project app that he's discovered that we're looking at, and it's like, just geeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything that makes that saves me time.
Yeah.
Because the most time consuming part of this is the analysis part. Collecting the data and looking at it is fine, and it's relatively easy, but trying to interpret it and figure out what it means and what you're looking at takes time. So anything that saves me from having to manually enter or try to look pretty enough for me to like look for patterns is a godsend. And it helped me do that, because otherwise Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so would something like this, and would you consider something like this being possibly like a presentation or an event at like the MMA conference? Essentially, we're gonna have 50 to 80 people basically do analysis and collect all that analysis and bring it into the app.
Holy cow, that is a great idea.
That's what.
Yeah, I mean you. And I mean the app does a lot of stuff in the background for you, but I mean you can do stuff in Excel as well. It just takes a little bit more to set it up, but for example, the percent defect testing, which or it's called P charting. I think that's the actual like statistical test you're doing. It is called P charting, and basically it only does that on the true to brand test. So basically, again, you have there's 4 separate criteria: visual, aroma, taste, and mouthfeel, and then overall. I'm sorry, 5. Overall, the holistic part of it is the last thing. So you're just answering yes or no, and it just takes, without getting too technical, but it basically just takes the percentage of no's, and then charts those on, your basically creates a chart, a p-value chart that helps you generate thresholds. So, for example, this brand may normally have a limit of about 10% defect. Well, if it goes above that, then there's a problem. And then you can go back and look at what that might be based on your brew house notes or your sensory panel notes, and try to figure out what's going on so you can react. So that's the biggest part of it. So it does all that for me. And so like after the window closes, it'll have it and it'll chart it on that graph. And so I can see if it falls within our thresholds or our brew house limits, which is really handy. But I can talk about too the difference between what most people, probably most of the listeners are familiar with, is the triangle test versus other sorts of statistical tests that you can use, and what they tell you, and how one may be a better fit than the other in a particular instance. But
yeah, very cool.
Yeah, that really is. I was just looking over Draft Lab's site, and on their blog, they actually had an article about the limitations of the mighty triangle test.
Oh yeah, it's actually a pretty good test, because I thought because I had originally implemented, I was like, all right, we can do triangle test, blah blah blah. And it's like, oh wait, yeah, that's because both tests have their limitations. Like any test or any statistical test, there's going to be some limitation. And triangle tests are still good, and they tell you like, is this different? Yes or no. But and I guess in a quality control standpoint is what I'm more concerned with is for our core brands, is this batch similar enough to this batch or 10 batches down the road? So I want to know batch to batch variation if they fall within a certain I won't say specification, but within a certain threshold. So that's what it's good for, and it tells me that I guess I was trying to come up with an analogy that's not in that blog post, but they have like a picture of an egg, a hard-boiled egg cut in half, and then they have like, this is where you're going for in the yolk. As long as it falls within the yolk, you're okay. But once it gets into the white, you're out of you're out of spec and then there's a problem. That's kind of what that test tells you. Whereas a triangle test would just tell you, yes, it's the same, or yes, it's different. It doesn't tell you like how different it would be.
Yeah, and also it's focused usually on just like one specific factor,
Yeah.
right? Not,
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more limiting. Yeah.
But yeah, I still use triangle tests. Like we're basically trying to set up bench trials for. We want to find a new house Brettanomyces strain, and brewer really does not like THP or what a lot of people would call like mousy or like Cheerio, like wet Cheerios. I've heard people call it. But some breads produce a lot of that to the point of an off flavor. And so basically we're setting up trials, and then we would do basically triangle tests with these different yeast strain. Well, I guess it wouldn't be a triangle because it's more than 3 or more than 2 that we have. So it might be like a multi-level triangle test at that point. But basically it's the same sort of setup.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it really is. I was just kind of wondering, because Ethereal, I'm assuming, started out as a brewery. When did the mead come in, and did you bring that, or did they do that and then come find you?
Oh, no. So yeah, they're a brewery right now. They're not doing, I've kind of brought mead into it. And it's kind of like a side project. Like I actually did a graph. So we have a pilot, like a one barrel pilot system that we'll brew on from time to time. And so I did a graph, or actually no, it was very similar to Bray Denard's spacecraft, the apple cider mead and beer, kind of small batch. And I've done stuff like that, and we've talked about doing some braggots. But yeah, we mostly do beer, but my kind of, they know that I do a lot of mead at home. Like I don't brew a lot of beer anymore just because I brew at the brewery. But yeah, so we do, so Ethereal, I feel like so a lot of mead makers, I don't know if Sergio would know more about this. So the size, I mean, we're still pretty small. Ethereal is a 10-barrel brew house. And we can do double brews. And so we have one 30-barrel and like one 20-barrel tank that will like basically just complicate out some of our best sellers. But, we're pretty small. But we're probably the only brewery that size in Lexington that has basically a dedicated quality control program or somebody on staff that manages it. Now there are bigger breweries that are like 50 and 30 barrel brew systems that regionally distribute, and they do quality control, and they have to because they're sending product out, across the state, across state lines. But as far as like our size, there's very few that do a lot of like the stuff that we do, like microbiology type auger plating, the sensory analysis and stuff like that. But I guess Ethereal has been kind of helping other breweries and trying to help them begin to set up some of these practices, because it's not very hard to set it up, and it doesn't take a lot of capital to get started doing some of these things like plating, very low cost, or implementing some of the just regular like sensory checks or whatnot. So and talk some of that and how it may apply to the mead world or even the home mead maker. I use some of these practices in my home brewing too.
That's really interesting. I mean, how many craft breweries are there? Littler ones. out there?
In Lexington, there are 8.
Okay.
8 or 9, I think 9. Yeah. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 that are about our size or smaller. And then there are, I think, there are 2, which some of y'all may be familiar with, Country Boy or West 6. They have 50 barrel brew houses, and they distribute, and those are pretty big. And then actually probably 9 or 10, because there's Kentucky Ale, the Alltech brewery, there too. So yeah, about 10 here in Lexington.
Okay.
It's hard to keep track of sometimes.
Yeah. So how is it that you ended up coming over to these guys? I mean, you were saying you got involved in home brewing and then fell into the mead hole, and for your home brewing stuff. But how'd you end up coming up with these guys? They posted a job, or they knew you and said, "Dude, you have to come"? Or
it was kind of word of mouth, really. I had been, kind of keeping my ear to the ground about working at a brewery. But yeah, a lot of people weren't. I mean, aside from being a brewer, which I was like, that'd be fun. But I guess I gravitated towards Ethereal because they actually had dedicated or lab space. But we're a pretty tight group, all the brewers here in town. So we all kind of know each other. And so I knew the brewer, and then knew the guy who was doing some consulting work as a quality control person. And that, it's kind of just word of mouth, and just kind of fell into it. And they were like, "Hey, would you like to do this?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so he kind of, the guy who gave me the job, kind of showed me like, "Here's what we've been doing, blah, blah, blah." And then just took it. And then once I got hired, kind of did my own thing, really. They just kind of gave me freedom to do what I wanted, which is really, really nice. Being in a brewery that really, being in an environment that really wants to know about, improving ways that they can improve their quality in a more systematic, rigorous way, and then basically giving me the resources to do that.
Beats
and really what they told me, they were just like,
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, on the mead side of things, like what kind of size batches are you guys working on there?
Well, I mean, it's just small batch. If anything, it's like maybe 1 barrel that we're doing. So maybe like 10, or no, I'm sorry, not 1 barrel, half barrels, 10 gallons. And then it may just be on our like specials, like rotating tap, our small batch tap. Just kind of the fun stuff. But
draft stuff, or is like stand strength?
It's normally just draft type, like session type stuff, or beer strength, we'll say.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And
sorry. So many people. Some people say session mead, some people say draft.
That craft or.
Yeah, I've been trying to push I consistently try to use draft, especially with the consumer. I think it's a little bit more easier for them to comprehend, where somebody walking into a meadery might not necessarily be adept in, beer language, right? So for them, a session mead, that means nothing to them. But to a beer drinker, it does mean something to them, and it's completely not in most cases. It's not a session beer strength. You're normally talking like 7 to 8.5%. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're expecting like a 3%. It's like, whoa.
Yeah, it's like,
the term session to me has always suggested you're going to get drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got that last weekend. I was at the Tales of the Cocktail, the big cocktail convention down in New Orleans, and we were talking about part of the talk that I was in. We were talking about styles, and one of the things we talked about was session meads. And when I told them it was like between 4 and 8%, everybody's eyes got really big.
Yeah. Which is session in relation, relatively speaking, to like a 14%, or 12% wine.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I always thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah, the way it ended up turning out for me is if I'm talking to a mead maker, I say session mead, but if I'm talking to anybody else, it's draft mead.
Yeah, it makes more sense.
and I like that, and I do like that terminology a little bit better because I think it describes it a little bit more. Because usually they're carbonated, they fit that kind of being on draft. I've seen other places call it craft, like craft meads or craft ciders, which is fine, I guess too. But it's now the language is starting to get a little bit muddled with the expansion of it.
Yeah, I think, to a general consumer, you say draft mead, they automatically kind of just, imagine a beer, strength, something that's on draft. You don't hear of like 14, 16% alcohol, beverages coming off the tap. I mean, obviously you could do that. There's some plenty of meaderies.
I'd say I've seen it done.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's plenty that do
we
that.
Actually, it's better enjoyed by like a a bottle or like a small thing, or if it is on tap, it comes in like a little 5 or maybe a 10 ouncer.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. It's especially at least on the distribution side, it's interesting because normally even on the session mead side of things, like a keg, a sixtel of beer. So you're talking 5.2 gallons, basically. Normally goes for anything like $75 to $95 for a sixtel. But then you're talking about a draft mead, and that normally goes for anywhere from like $175 to $195. And it's really, really difficult to get it out there. And then I've actually run into some instances where like distributors want me to keg up our standard meads or standard strength meads. And I'm like, are you sure?
Yeah.
And they said, yeah, we have to count them. I'm like, are they sure? Because the cost of that is going to be in your like, $500 range. You don't get very often outside of the actual, production facility at the meadery itself. Here and there, but very few in between. Yeah,
so we our homebrewing group last year, we were like, let's do something for Mead Day. So we had like we set up like honey tastings, and then two homebrewers came in and made a batch for people to show them how to make mead, and then basically they throw $10 our way, we would pull off a gallon for them, and they'd ferment it at home. But we talked to the place we were doing it. It was like a bar within a fence space. It was like a craft mead bar or a craft beer bar, and we were like, "Can we get a mead?" And they're like, "Yeah, we can get a keg of Moonlight. We'll get a keg of Moonlight." It's like, ooh, that ran them quite a bit of money. But
depends
it was awesome.
on which one too.
Yeah, I think they got which one was it? It was the was it the red currant one, the red dress?
Red dress, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, or was it no? It may have been the triple berry one.
Desire.
Yeah.
Desire.
Yeah, Desire. Yeah, I think it was that one.
Yeah, my favorite's Fling. I love Fling.
Yeah.
There's not enough strawberry rhubarb meads on the planet, to my way of thinking, but that's just me. That's a hint, Sergio.
All right.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I growing up on the other side of the state, like I had never had strawberry rhubarb pie, and then I came over,
oh my God, yeah,
Central and Eastern Kentucky, and they were like, it's a staple, and I was like, I haven't heard of this.
Growing up, my grandma made strawberry rhubarb pie, strawberry rhubarb jam, strawberry rhubarb cobbler. That just was always. She had a huge patch of rhubarb. And there was a local farm where we'd go pick strawberries every summer. And it was just awesome.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
don't worry, I'd never heard of strawberry and rhubarb either.
Do they even have rhubarb in Australia?
Yeah, we do apple and rhubarb all the time.
Oh, okay. Just not strawberries, huh?
They have more rebarb than rhubarb. I
Yeah,
believe.
right. Well, they're barbarians down there. What do they know? They're not strawberry rhubarb. Come on. I mean, seriously?
Rhubarb is the strand of wire you put on the top of your fence to keep the roos out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Doesn't work real good on rabbits, though.
Yeah, it goes great with strawberries. It gets the sulfur dioxide out too.
It really does, yeah. It's the flavor combination of the sweet and the tart are they really work well together.
Yeah, so we did it was more, we made a beer and we were like, well, we wanted to use squid ink with it, and so we made this beer and we called it Squid Berries, from the show Squidbillies. But so we got a bunch. What was it? Oregon Fruit gave us like a bunch of fruit puree samples, and they were like 3-4 pound bags.
Yeah, I got a bunch of those.
And
I gotta do something with them.
Yeah, so we're just like, all right, we have like 6 different fruits, and we were like, well, what do we do? Let's just throw it all in there and see what happens. And so we had rhubarb, and I remember opening it up, and I was like, man, this smells like pea soup. Yeah, and I was like, man, I hope this turns out good. And we were like, well, it's already open, just dump it in. We're like, okay. But that turned out to be like a fruit, more or less like a malted fruit wine. So much fruit in there.
Oh my gosh. I've got 4 jars of Amish strawberry rhubarb pie filling, canned. It's like quart jars, and I had gotten it for my daughter's wedding because her husband is a strawberry rhubarb pie nut. So I made little bitty pies for their guests, for the wedding. And so I found this. I was like, where the hell am I going to get? Because you can't get rhubarb in the South, and we don't have the right. You need a cold snap in the spring for it to grow properly, and we never get that. We go straight from it's kind of almost cold to, oh shit, it's hot. There's never really that snap like you get up north. And so
it grows up north.
Oh God, yeah. My dad has it all over the place. He loves the stuff, and so I couldn't really grow it here. So I found this stuff on Amazon, and I bought like way too much of it. So I've got like a gallon of this. And it's minimal sugar added too, because it's Amish, so they're not putting a lot of, they're going right with the sweet and the strawberries. So strawberry rhubarb and a little bit of sugar, and I'm just gonna dump the whole jar of jam, or of chopped up strawberries and rhubarb right into the bucket, and and just add honey and water until I get to something that looks decent, and then see what happens.
That puts some pectinates in there.
Oh yeah, totally. Are you kidding? The strawberries?
Lots of it.
Oh, lots of strawberry. Yeah, lots of pectinates in there. But yeah, but I'm gonna make like an anniversary mead for the kids with that.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah. I'll keep some back because tithing and all that.
Yeah. One of the things that we've been playing with, I guess it's kind of a side project that we've been talking about, is messing with koji. So that's the fungus that they use to make rice wine or sake.
Okay.
And we made a beer with it. So we actually koji'd rice and made like a rice, like koji. It was a koji, and it was like a saison style. And we did like the same thing with our rice lager. And I've been wanting to do a mead with it.
That would be interesting.
And actually,
why not?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Commercially, so are you guys licensed as a brewery and winery there?
Nope, just a brewery. So yeah, we'd have to have some. And I think I think I looked it up. Sake, I think, is, if you're using rice or putting there, it's a process. It's a brew. It's under a brewing license. So we would have to have. And I forget what it is in the state, but I think it's at least like 25% malt or some sort of grain product.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I know it's some percentage of grain or malt in there. But yeah,
how
I was like, I've been. I'm sorry.
So how are you guys going about the actual mead production there that you guys serve?
Oh, I guess so. Maybe we're not actually producing any mead commercially. I mean, we may just do like a braggot.
Gotcha.
Like that's about the extent of what we'll do, and it may be just we take a base style and add, or one of our core styles, maybe like pull off, 5-10 gallons and blend and add honey to it and make like a braggot. Or do like a small batch, but that's about the extent because we're not a winery. We don't have like a winery license.
Yeah.
So we're not commercial.
You know what I would speak to about the whole stock is speak with Mike Fall. I believe he actually just did something similar like that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that's kind of like a sake mead kind of a thing. Yeah, speak with Mike Fall about that. I'm sure he'd be open to kind of talking out ideas or how he went about doing it.
Yeah, because we had because how we did our with our koji, we koji'd the rice and we just mashed with it. But we're playing around with actually brewing it like a sake, which is it's a rice wine. It's you're still brewing, but you're still adding like nutrient and things like that to it. But it's not really a mixed fermentation, it's a parallel fermentation. So as the koji breaks down the starches or digests the starches, then the sugars and the yeast eat it. But we've been tossing around like, well, how are we going to do this? And basically it's just we either brew a sake and blend it with a mead, or the same thing with a beer. We would make a sake and then blend it that way. And that's kind of what we've been coming up with.
Yeah, commercially, I'd be careful with that because that wouldn't be that would be allowed commercially to blend them. They would have to be fermented together. Because then otherwise, he comes in and says, "Well, now you're blending a wine product with a beer product," and their heads explode for some reason.
Yeah.
Well, their heads explode for some reason anyway.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with all that stuff. And I remember even when I was talking just to the state of New Jersey to try to get the meadery license, or actually just the permit that they issued for me before we even got the meadery license created here. They were drilling me on the use of fruit. They didn't want to allow me, after giving me the green light that they were going to allow me to make mead in New Jersey. They were drilling me on the fact that they're not going to allow me to use any fruit. And I fought back on that, and they said, well, that's what our winery license is for. That's going to be stepping on the winery license. And I said, well, every meadery that's distributing into New Jersey are distributing their best products, and most of their best products are fruit meads. So if you're not going to allow me to use fruit, then you're kind of putting me at a huge disadvantage. And so we ended up working out a deal where I could go up to like 33% of my fermentable sugars coming from fruit, and that was the ceiling. With the new meadery license, I fought and I got it up to 49, where it should be. But with that said, when we were discussing this and we were going back and forth, I made sure that I didn't bring up the fact that I can use grape juice, right? Grapes are a fruit. If I brought up I would be possibly using grape juice to ferment with the honey, again, their heads would have exploded, and I probably never would have been able to open Melovino. Sometimes you just got to be real careful with, do things,
Yeah, that's what we've been, just talking about. There's a popular cider beverage here, or it's actually brewed in Ohio. It's marketed as a rosé ale, and it used to be just like a rosé. I think it was labeled as rosé beer. Anyway, it's rosé ale now. And so when they came into Kentucky, in order to not be charged with the luxury champagne tax, they basically added malt to it. I don't know how much they did, but they added a little bit and changed it to rosé ale. But it still tastes the same. It's just that's how they got around it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always a way around it. Especially when you get into the labeling side of things, forget it. I mean, there's stories galore just on the Facebook groups out there. But I mean, yeah, I literally, coincidentally, I'm just about to bottle up a strawberry rosé Pilot at the meadery, and I couldn't have the word rosé anywhere on the label. But
because it's the wine. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just called it by any other name, right? So a rose by any other name and whatever. And I kind of hinted during, in the description, the little puffery on the label. And, I did use the word blush and the word rose, but obviously in the context, they couldn't really say anything about it. It's such a nightmare with how things are labeled, but people are able to get away with certain things, and then everybody else questions how they were able to do that.
Well, and it's about knowing how to work a system, knowing what not to tell them, and also knowing that if you ask 3 TTB agents, you'll get 5 different answers. It's
partially it's luck as well sometimes.
Yeah. And you got to think about it too, the consumer. It's not helping them out at all with all these kind of vague kind of terms that we're calling things, and then just to be able to get them in their hands, I guess what I'm talking about is like with certain meads or honey wines or fruited wines with honey or this or that, or like you were saying, like you have to put these kind of general vague descriptors that may not be the best descriptor for that product, but just what you got to do.
Yeah, I've even gotten 2 TTB label reviewers to agree to take my side on the whole idea of, in some cases, like their whole job essentially is to sit there and make sure that we are not confusing the customer or misleading the customer is actually the term they use, right? That we're not misleading the customer with how we describe a certain product. But in some cases, because of what they need to follow as per the regulations, they actually make it more misleading, making us not say certain. And I've actually gotten 2 reviewers to agree with me on certain label applications. But it's the way the regs are, and until they get changed, nothing can be done.
Yeah. Well, I guess I have a question for you, Sergio, since you distribute, you have a pretty wide distribution network and stuff, and I know you're pretty large. Like, what kinds of, quality control, things do you do at the meadery? Or at your meadery?
Yeah, we don't have that huge of a distribution yet, but I think we're in 5 states at the moment. But still, we're getting out there. Quality control. So I guess a few things as far as at least assuring consistency. We use all reverse osmosis water for all of our meads, so it's 100% RO. We're not adding anything back, unless I'm doing some of my session stuff. I do some beer style meads, and in those cases, I actually build the water up to that particular beer style that I'm kind of trying to mimic. And but besides that, all our water. So our water doesn't change throughout the year. It's always exactly the same. We also have this pretty neat yeast rehydration machine, essentially. It's from Cryer in Germany. It's called their yeast booster. As far as I know, I'm still the only one in the United States that owns one of these. And I bought it when I first opened up when I purchased their glycol chiller as well. So essentially what it does, it's a tank, I would say approximately about 50 to 80 gallons capacity. And the cool part about it is you fill it up with your water and go for a mixture. And it circulates in the tank through a heating element. It brings it up to 104 degrees. A light starts flashing, letting you know that it's time to add the yeast. We throw the yeast in. We hit the button to continue the cycle, and it essentially keeps circulating the yeast, introducing oxygen at the same time and rehydrating the yeast at that perfect temp. And then meanwhile, we put it on a timer and temp settings where we want it to end. So essentially we have another tube that's connected to the machine that automatically pumps in, like, and every 10 or 15 minute intervals, pumps in some of the must and introduces it into the yeast that's rehydrating with the GoFerm. And
cool.
it also has a little bit of a heat exchanger for that you can just connect the hose to or glycol system to, that because of how it shoots back into it, it kind of spreads out a broadcast on the backside of the tank where the glycol jacket is, and it automatically cools it down to the exact temperature that our must is in the tank at. It's pretty neat, like fully automatic. And for the reason that I got that for was essentially I wanted to ensure 100% consistency, perfect yeast rehydration, 100% consistent, no temperature swings when the yeast gets put into the tank. Then anything else is, I follow my TOSNA protocol for the yeast nutrients. We take initial pH readings and obviously bricks. We know it's weird for me because I came from the homebrew side of things and particularly brewing a lot of beer. So I've always been more familiar with the specific gravity side of things. So I could taste something and give you pretty close range of what specific gravity that beverage might be. But on the beer side of things, I'm still to this day, I'm totally lost.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to me. And actually, bricks and beer where they use Play-Doh, bricks is actually a more accurate way of measuring it because it's based on weight and not by volume or density, right? Which volume is a parameter of density. So you have to take into account the temperature of said liquid with specific gravity. So, bricks is it's what grams of sugar and 100 mils of must, or for beer it's or Play-Doh it's beer. So
I still kind of find it interesting. Our first reading is always in bricks because we use the good old trusted Mead calculator on gotmead.com. There's
Yay!
for
I use it.
recipe.
Yeah, it's great.
And
wait until you
Tazo's
see
also
the next
great.
version. I got somebody going to rewrite it for me, so.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
And whatever. Long story short, it's we start everything with bricks, but after that first initial reading, we switch over to specific gravity after that. And we're able to control final gravity by cold crashing if we need. With TOSNA 2.0, I've kind of gotten it to the point where it kind of stops where I want it, right around anywhere between 13 to 14.5% alcohol, which is wanted. And after that, we take some more, pH readings. We'll take a free SO2 reading that we can determine, sulfite additions, just for preservation, not more so for stabilizing. And then after that, it's filtration down to sterile and nominal. And then we also do our in line with our bottling line, we pass it through 2 cartridge filters, a polypropylene 1 micron to catch anything that might have we've been using lenticular filtration essentially for everything, but the 1 micron cartridge filter will catch anything that might end up clogging the filter cartridge that's right after that, which is our absolute filtration right before it goes into our bottle filler reservoir. And then from the other side, we're literally sulfiting. We're sanitizing all the bottles. We need to rinse the bottles anyway. Otherwise, there's a ton of cardboard dust and all the fibers inside the bottle sometimes. So we have to rinse out the bottles. So we plug up a bucket with sulfited citric acid solution. So we're rinsing with that so we can sanitize at the same time. And then everything meets at the bottle filler where that was clean, rinse, sanitized, and steam sterilized. So as far as quality control, that's a little bit of everything as far as consistency and making sure we have, stand-up product.
Yeah, and that's what I usually tell some of the other breweries that have been asked. And so a lot of this too, it directly applies to meaderies and wineries too. So collecting that data, but not just collecting, just all of it that you can, but being very specific in what you're measuring, right? Because you have to have a certain objective, right? So why, like for example, like why? I guess just an example. So like why measure SO2? Well, you want to make sure the objective is it could be to make sure that the product is shelf stable, or I want to know if I'm getting any oxygen pickup when I'm transferring or doing this. So I'm measuring if there's a change in the level of SO2, meaning there'd be sulfur pickup. And so having a set of objectives is important in any quality control program. A reason for why you're measuring it. And the point of that is that if there's a problem, you can react to it. So if you are getting, a big decline in your SO2, well, something's not right. So being able to act on that. So for example, you're not losing it all, and then it's not a shelf stable product, and then you have re-fermentations in the bottles. Or if and or when you do get contamination, it's not going to just cause a big mess. It's
even on the other side of like consistency conversation, right? So then also comes in the art, right? So the art side of like mead making, beer making, anything. You're at the mercy of your ingredients, right? So if the maltsters get anything a little bit different, that base malt might be a little off compared to what you're used to. The hops, just from, not just.
That's the biggest inconsistency that we deal with is, hop varieties or hop grow crops or whatnot.
Yeah. And even from grower to grower, it's gonna vary. From lot to lot, it'll vary. Right?
Yeah.
Because the big guys go in there and rub some hops in their hands, smell them, and say, we want this lot. And then everything.
I want 10,000 pounds of that.
Yeah. And then the rest of it that didn't get handpicked is what everybody else gets. So the homebrew shops and non-contract, hop purchases and all that. I mean, you even have websites now like Lupulin Exchange where, people are literally just selling surplus hops because they had to buy X amount of hops to get, their hand-picked ones, and then they sell the rest on an exchange website, basically.
Yeah, that's where most of the smaller breweries get their hops through, through secondary market exchanges like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then,
I got
lucky. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, we've had to do things like we got to do sensory on products like that just to make sure they're consistent. We know, this one may be, because we've gotten hops from the same person and they're like brown. It's like, whoa, these are like oxidized and shit now. So what are we going to do with this?
Yep.
So we'll do sensory on those as well.
Yeah, just throw those oxidized hops in a corner and make a lambic in another year or two.
Yeah.
But getting back to the conversation about the art side, it's so no matter how much you try to target consistency from batch to batch, particularly on the same recipe. Every recipe, it has more of a chance of being different than the last than being exactly the same, right? So there's always going to be certain variables they're not going to be able to control. The fruits, the honey, any little temperature difference during your fermentation will also kind of change the characteristics. I mean, every little thing comes into play. So at the same time, while trying your hardest to ensure consistency, at the end of the day, you just have to kind of give in to the fact that, the craft side of it is always going to end up taking over. You have no control over all those little variables, right? So that's why it's kind of cool. Like I've even adopted the whole idea of just putting batch numbers on my bottles, right? Before we used to just put like, bottle, year and date, but now it's more, I don't know, we kind of felt it was more suitable. Let's put a batch number. Now we could go back and compare like batch 3 to batch 6,
Oh yeah, it's almost necessary now in the beer world, just because like a lot of people now are, especially if you're wanting to get into canning, especially if you're wanting to get into canning or any packaging, right? Like when you're it's great for the consumer to have those dates on there, but if you're trying to assess that product to make sure it meets your targets or your specs, having that is super crucial, because then you can go back. It's like, okay, well, what did we do on this batch versus this batch? And like, oh, yep. Okay, that's different. And so yeah, having batch codes, bottle dates, and yeah, all of that is almost necessary now, especially if you're wanting to ensure that consistency once it goes out the door, because then you have no control over it.
Exactly. And you have no control over, how it's stored or anything. I mean, it's, and even with like bottling dates on a label, what I found is most retail accounts, no matter in what state you're talking about, they don't like having bottling dates on the products that they put on the shelves, because certain consumers might look at it and say, they walk into a liquor store today and they bottle, any meadery, XYZ meadery, and the bottling date was like a year and a half ago, and they're like, oh, that's getting a little old. Well, an educated consumer would be like, oh, wow, hell yeah, that must be really good by this point, right? It just keeps getting better with age. Mm-hmm. But yeah, retail accounts don't like bottling dates and labels. That's what I found.
Oh, I'm sure they don't want people to know how long it's been sitting there.
Yeah, that's why you got to put the bottling date in a you got to put the bottling date in a code that your customers will recognize and can decode, like putting the date backwards with a 1 at the front or something, and then the average consumer and the customer won't care.
Or Julian or bottling run or something.
Yeah, it's I've actually tried different things. Originally we did month and year, and then we started then trying to figure out a way to be able to kind of purchase a higher quantity of labels for the our more consistent produced meads, our biggest sellers, so that we could save more money on our label orders, higher quantity, lower cost per label, and all that. So we ended up trying out like a series of numbers that our label printer was able to automatically kind of put on our label. So each label would just go in sequential order. So then we just jot like those lot numbers, so those whatever you want to call them, those codes, and we could say, okay, this batch in our own personal notes in house was 1001 to 3004, whatever it is. Well, we found that's because we would be like, what fucking batch was that? What batch was 1000? But if we go
that would help too when you're I was gonna say that would help if you have a batch and then you want to know what number on the canning line that can was. But you still have to have that batch number to go back to it, otherwise it's like, okay, these are just numbers. And
it's one of those things too. So it's we just ended up going with batch codes. We thought, it was easy. That way it's also cool for us to be like, oh wow, we just made our 6th batch of Midnight Jack. Oh, that's pretty cool. When we get to like 10 or 50 or something like that, it'll be even cooler. But I think that was the easiest route that we took. But especially on the beer side, packaging wise, having dates on there is definitely not a good idea. I think that's why most of them just do some kind of like a series of numbers, a sequential series of numbers or something.
Well, as I say, we just started our getting into canning, and so we approached it because like everybody wants to get into canning. It's awesome, your beer's out there, but we kind of took it from in a strict quality sense. And we were like, okay, we want to do canning. How are we going to ensure that this product is going to last on the shelf and whatnot? And so one of the ways that we could, and so how do we make that known to the consumer? Like, we want the consumer to know how that it's a fresh product, that they're not getting an old product. And so, yeah, we said we're going to do, because we were canning a New England IPA and a fruited goes. So especially for the IPA, we were like, we want this to be consumed, as fresh as possible. So we were like, we'll batch code and date. And then and so the canning line that we use, the mobile canning line, actually laser etched it for us. But we also have just like a hand sticky gun label or label gun or whatever. And we just would get the 4-packs and just put that same code on the 6-pack holders for us and the consumers. So, but yeah, we were ensuring that, when I did the plate samples, that they were clean, no foreign wild yeast were in there. And then we also measured oxygen, make sure that it was a, stable product. There wasn't a lot of oxygen ingress from the canning line or in the beer. And then also, I randomly pull, I pulled about a couple of cases from that canning run to save for sensory, and do like forced age tests to see like how they would hold up. So, and there's little things like that, and it's more or less a mindset, that once you get into the mindset of how can I ensure that I'm, giving the most, or what information would tell me that I'm getting the most consistent product and I'm doing it for a purpose. Like, you just get in that mindset and the stuff just kind of rolls out with it. It's really, real easy. Cause I've seen breweries that, one in particular, like, we looked at one of their, batch sheets, and it's like, it was a beer that had been sitting there for, a week or whatever, like normal brew time, but like on their brews log, they only checked the gravity twice, or, there was key bits of information that could have told them a lot about the beer if there was issues that was left out, or they wanted to get in canning like right out of the gate before they had these measures in place. Because it's a lot easier to deal with issues when you have these than just kind of running around with your head cut off, when not if it happens, when the inevitable, when it happens. Because shit goes south all the time.
All the time, yeah.
What was
it?
And
General Patton says no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy.
Shit goes south often and quick. And
there's a philanthropist that had a really great quote. His name is Mike Tyson. Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah. But at least like at least how to react. And as long as you're not just randomly collecting data for the sake of collecting data, but with a specific goal. Like you can at least react to mitigate problems.
Yeah. We've got a listener question from Joe Vinciguerra. He says he'd like to know how you're measuring ABV on the commercial side. Are you using a bulliometry or similar lab techniques on each batch, or just going off SG or Brix based estimates for the most part? And then does the TTB require a certain technique?
I know for the TTB thing, I know their thresholds are a lot stricter than wine. It's like 0.1% that you have to be within. I think it's 0.1 or 0.3. Yeah, it's very strict. So for us, we do specific gravity I also will do what's called forced fermentation tests. So whenever we pitch the yeast, I will pull a sample off, and then I will basically put that in our shaker, or put it on stir bar or something, sterile, of course. And you're going, or aseptically, I should say. And basically, I put it at like 80 degrees and stir it for 2 days, and I force that yeast to go to terminal gravity, and that tells me when the yeast will peter out. So that'll tell me when it's going to hit terminal. And then, so we'll use specific gravity measurements, but we do have an ebullianometer. I think it broke by the time I got there, so I haven't used it. But we also, if we need to, we'll do a third party. There's a lab in town that will do ABV testing for us, and so they'll do Anton Par. If you're familiar with that, it's a very expensive machine. But so they'll use that. I would love to have an Anton Par because I can do so much with it. But so that's how we will do ABV. Now I could be wrong. I know since we're not canning our product or distributing our product, our canned products are only in-house. I don't know if we have, sorry, lost my train of thought. When we're canning, if we do canning more, we'll probably fix that ebullianometer to use that, or do regular third-party testing, just to ensure that we meet that strict criteria. Otherwise, then if we get audited, then that's a problem if we don't have that information. So having that SG information and third-party testing data to get that alcohol thing. So but for right now, we're just doing SG, and I use that the forced fermentation to let me know, so that if it does over attenuate, then we know it's probably a contamination issue, and then we can go from there. So
you're essentially taking the must or the wort in that case, right? You're talking about on the beer side. So you're taking the wort, and you're just so it's the wort or it's the finished beer.
Oh, I'm sorry. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it. So you can either take the wort and pitch and over pitch yeast, and basically you're just trying to throw yeast at it and make it ferment down to as much and as fast as you can. What's easier for me, after we pitch yeast into the beer, I will aseptically sample that and then put that into a shaker at like 80 degrees. So it's beer. I'm sampling the beer. I'm sampling it right after we pitch.
So you're essentially doing a fast forward fermentation, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so for the mead, for the mead world, for mead, I don't know how handy that would be. A lot of times what comes in what is most, or it tells us the most about it, is because in the brewing industry, we will reuse yeast. We will harvest and repitch. In the mead world, you're not doing that most of the time. So a lot of times too, because we're harvesting at particular times, we're putting a selective pressure on that yeast, and over multiple cycles, you'll start to see the yeast will slow down or under attenuate. So that'll also cue me into if there's an issue with the yeast that are just petering out, and that we may have to toss that yeast slurry, or reorder new yeast because they've just kind of petered out.
Yeah.
So if you're harvesting and repitching yeast, because I know there are some mead makers that do that, especially for their draft meads, or they're using beer yeasts. that would be that's also a really easy and simple test that could tell you a lot about, you know, the life of your yeast that you're using.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I never actually considered doing that. Yeah, I'm wondering if you did it on the mead side, especially with nutrient additions too, right? You'd have to kind of like cut back and figure out your like gram additions for whatever size, like, you know, sample size you're actually pulling in order to do that, and whether or not, you know, doing like a staggered nutrient addition versus just throwing all the nutrients in up front would make a difference in that kind of a test. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, you could do that. That could tell you, you know, if you're pitching new yeast every time, then if it stalls out on you, then yeah, it's most likely a nutrient issue at that point. And a lot of times too, because it only finishes in 2 days, and so it's a really quick test, so that, you know, it's like, oh, you know, it didn't attenuate all the way down. So in that case, you could, you know, add more nutrient to it. And then see what happens, and then, you know, you've mitigated that problem. Or a lot of times we've had it stall out on us, and then the forced fermentation test kind of confirmed that. But a lot of times too, we would catch it before, and then we would pitch, you know, more yeast into it, or fresher yeast, so it would ferment out all the way. So yeah, that actually would be a cool thing to try with the with different nutrient levels.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I got to try that next time. We're probably going to fill like 2 more tanks in another week or 2. I'm actually going to try to do after we pitch. That'll be pretty interesting. Try to fast forward and see. As it's a little like fast forward in time to see where this batch would end up hitting. All right.
Yeah, and the thing with you would have to. So usually, what I'll do is, like, when we pitch our yeast, we just include it's like a keg they call it a yeast brink, but we keep our yeast that we harvest in that keg with a TC valve. So we'll hook that up through our loop, and as we're transferring beer, then we'll have it on a scale, and then we'll shoot as much. We'll put it under positive pressure with CO2 and shoot that yeast out of the brink into the beer that it's transferring. And we'll do that early on, so that as it mixes, it makes a uniform suspension. And then, you know, I might wait 15 minutes and then sample. But since you have that rehydration machine that's, you know, at specific intervals shooting yeast into your tank, and it's mixing it, then that would ensure that you've got a good homogeneous
it's
density of yeast.
It's actually pulling must into the machine where the yeast is rehydrating. So it's
okay.
So, yeah, it uses the must to slowly drop the temp to the pitching temp that you wanted, that you set it to, and then at the end it'll shoot everything into the tank itself on its own. But I mean, I mean, even, like, you know, at least on the commercial side, you know, on the homebrew side, it's a lot easier. You grab a sanitized spoon and you just stir from the bottom up and down, right? But yeah, commercial side, I mean, we do a lot of like recirculations within the tank where we just pump out the drain and pump it back into a racking arm, running at like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. You know, we get a good circulation that way.
Yeah, we do that with some of our hops. We'll resuspend just to get more interaction with the hops and the yeast.
Yeah, that helps quite a bit. Yeah.
So I guess too, one of the things that I did look up before I came. So some of the media that I use for plating the brewery may not suit a meadery, but I was looking up through, I think UC Davis has a nice enology info page, and also Virginia Tech does as well. And they had some medias that they recommend using. And actually the 2 they recommended, I use at the brewery too. So I mean, things like So I will plate on 3 different medias, and they're all designed to select for different types of organisms. So one I have that's yeast, and a lot of times you can use like, I think there's like just a basic wine must like yeast or auger recipe, or YPD, yeast peptone dextrose, is a really popular one. Basically use that to make sure that as kind of if I see contamination or like my house yeast. And then you can also buy reagents to mix with it, like cyclohexamide, which will inhibit bacteria, and also allow some Brettanomyces to grow. And then crystal violet is another one that I use, and then that will tell me if there's wild yeast contamination. So and then there's also some that you can use to tell that will tell you if you have lactic acid or acetic acid bacteria. It's called Warstein lab media. Those are the 3 that I use, and they're relatively inexpensive to use, and preparing them is pretty cheap. And then just get some sterile swabs and just go to town and start swabbing. We do that on a regular basis too. So we'll do we've started implementing like every 6 months we'll do a brewery cleanup, and during that time, like over a week or 2 weeks, we'll swab every tank just to make sure our cleaning practices are where they need to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I spoke to the apple orchard where we get all of our cider from for cysers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I convinced them for 2 things. Number one, I'm going to take my beehives to their orchard when the apple blossoms are about to open up, so I could get some apple blossom honey. So that's pretty cool. And he's paying me for that, which is even cooler. And then 2, so you're going to take basically like an open plastic tote. We're just going to sanitize it. We're going to have some must already mixed mixed together, just honey and water. We're going to throw it into the open top. Well, essentially, it's like kind of a small tote. So essentially, we had a good 6-inch opening on the top, more or less.
Yeah.
We're going to install some battery-powered fans. Basically,
so you can do like a cool ship.
Yeah, in the middle of an apple orchard, though. All right.
Yeah.
We're gonna wait. So
That'd
when we take the hives up there, we're actually gonna do that and just try to see if we capture any wild yeast that's just flying through the air there, and hopefully we get something good out of it, and we use it for like an annual cyser, special release kind of a thing. I've heard I think it was Sierra Nevada that did something similar to that. They did that in a peach orchard, and they have this wild fermented beer that they've been repeating. I think they're about to produce their 3rd year, 3rd run of it. They just do this one huge batch in a foeder with that particular yeast, and they just keep that batch going every year with the same yeast.
Oh, I love foeders. I want a foeder so bad.
Yeah, super expensive, but yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. So that's cool because I think I looked at I have a couple of articles, and I can send them to academic articles that I can send to Vicky. But there's
that'd be great.
One of them is a cider. I forget what journal it's in, but they were looking at ciders, and they were doing a pure wild culture, a mixed culture, and then like a co-fermentation type program with ciders. And the variety they picked, and if you're in an apple orchard, I think it's either called Pichia or like Wicker Anamyces, is one of the more common ones that you find on apples. And that would be, and in that paper, they looked at different, if they fermented together or fermented, did like a sequential fermentation where they fermented for, I think, 1 to 10 days. with that wild strain, and then pitched yeast on top of that. And I'm pretty sure it was a wine variety yeast. But after reading that paper, I was like, I want to do a cyser like that. And so I think there was a lady who presented at the AMA this year that used the lactic acid yeast presentation. I think she used that Wicker Anamyces strain that Doc Bach isolated from somewhere. I can't remember where. But yeah, I have that plated at the lab, and I've been wanting to grow it up and try that. So
yeah, you'll find this interesting. We had a strain of lactobacillus isolated from a Jun culture. And we tried basically. I wanted to test out just to see what the lacto would do on its own. So I threw it into straight honey must, and it got like 8.8% alcohol, but it definitely dropped the acidity down to 2.8 and change, whatever that pH was, 2.8 and something. And that was over a course of like 48, 72 hours at around like 90 degrees, I believe it was. So I let it sit for another 2 weeks at that temp. Nothing else happened. So I took it off the heat and I forgot about it. So at least I know what the lacto does. And then basically like 2 months later, I had a friend come by and I pulled a sample. I was talking about it. We were tasting it. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wow, this is a little drier than I remember it. I take a hydrometer reading, it's like 8% alcohol. And I'm wondering, I'm like, I had no nutrients or no yeast pitch into this at all. And sent it out to a lab. They discovered there was a wild yeast, basically probably from the honey. That fermented 8% alcohol, starting at like 2.8 pH. And I got it banked for me at White Labs, so I could order it whenever I want. And I pitched it into a traditional mead must on its own. It did nothing. It actually went moldy. Luckily it was just a 5-gallon batch, but when I tried it again and through a larger pitch rate, nothing happened. I did it a third time and I added a bunch of citric acid to it to get it down to 2.7, 2.8, and it fermented.
It went off. Yeah.
So it's a Pichia strain that prefers only fermenting in acidic environments.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing
cool that it's like a sour mead yeast, right? So it's like you can sour it. You can boil it off if you want, right? To kind of get rid of the any of the bacteria, and then you can pitch this yeast and still get up to 8% alcohol.
Yeah, and that would be the nice thing with that Wicker Anamyces strain that the lady used in that talk. Supposedly it is lactic acid producing. We used it before and it didn't for some reason. I don't know. And I've talked to other brewers that have used it, and maybe we just didn't pitch enough yeast or didn't have a high enough pitch rate or it wasn't hot enough. But that would be interesting to pitch that in there, and then whatever yeast are in the honey would, pick up, because that yeast is not very attenuated. It usually maxes out at about 40%, I think is what it said. But it does produce, from what I've read about it, a lot of nice, complex, like esters. A lot of apple pear. I don't know about banana, but I'll have to look at that article again, because they did like a GC spec on it to see what the ester profile was of those beers. But yeah, actually I don't know what he was thinking, but he made this big strawberry mead must, and I guess forgot to pitch the yeast. Came back later and then it fermented. It was like 18%, and there was this yeast on the bottom, and we collected it. And one of the professors locally here had I gave it to him, and he did a PCR on it to see what it was, and it was like a wild yeast that's pretty common here.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cool things you can do, like with trying to isolate, yeast from honey and different fruits and flowers, especially in an orchard.
It sounds like
But that sounds really cool.
it does sound really cool. Sounds like we could do another whole show with the two of you.
I think that's a great.
Sure, just get us talking.
Yeah, hey, I'd be totally down with that. That would be awesome. I mean, there's so much. I mean, we could literally keep going on and on and on. But we've kept you for the requisite 2 hours, and I imagine you probably got a life you want to get back to. And I kind of hijacked Sergio tonight, so.
Oh, good. I'm along. I just came along for the ride.
Yeah. Hey,
I'm kind of the same. I'm just along for it, just here.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to have you, man. That's great, because there's just so much. We got people are like, nobody's talking because I think they're all taking notes on the chat. So.
Yeah, but yeah, I'd love to. Like the sensory thing you were talking about before. I mean, that'd be something fun to do for the AMA.
That would be awesome.
I think we need more stuff like that, right? I mean, we got a ton of great presentations every year, but a lot more, like some more sensory analysis type of presentations, like Carvin did, and Carolyn, who did the wild yeast presentation that you were talking. Yeah, stuff like that is awesome. I mean, we're gonna get a lot of good feedback, some good data, especially if we get like a little white paper written about it afterwards. It's just really good information to get out to all the mead makers out there.
Yeah, I would. We'll be opening speaker applications here pretty quick as soon as I can get the website up for the conference, and I'll ping you, Justin, because I would really love to see something like that. I mean, that would be, people would like that very much.
Yeah, and we can, I mean, also, if people are interested, me and a buddy of mine who works at that third-party lab that does some of our testing, we did a case study with one of our tanks about using microplating and assessing CIP. And so, if people are interested in doing that as well, like, that's something, that I wouldn't mind presenting as well. It's something really easy that a lot of meaderies can do.
Put through some presentation proposals as soon as that window opens up. I imagine it'll probably be within the next couple of weeks or so, but we'll announce it once it's all up and ready to go.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you could submit more than one presentation proposal.
Oh,
so
shoot, we had Tom present 4 different things last year because everything he had was too good to pass up. So.
Oh wow, man! More power to him. Dealing with one big presentation is enough, but 4?
Oh, God, no, Tom was amazing. He put in, like, beekeeping, so you want to be a beekeeper, then beekeeping 101, self-ice and sorbates, and what was the other one? There's another one to do with the mead-making process. But, yeah, I mean, I'm beginning to think Tom is actually a superhero. He just doesn't have a cape or something,
You can imagine. He really wanted to do a presentation, so he's put forward 4 presentation ideas. They're going to pick one of them, and it'll be great. I'll make it so they have to pick me. And then they picked all 4, and he's like, "Oh crap! Now I've got to do 4 presentations."
the shotgun approach.
Actually, he told me that he'd do 1 or 4 or none. He was happy in any way when he sent in the application. So I was like, "All right, Tom, if I may, have more than one of those," and he's like, "That's fine." I was like, "Okay."
Yeah.
So Tom was awesome. He really was. But yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing that really lets people dig into the nitty gritty of the behind the scenes of mead making. Is really, people like that. They really enjoy that stuff. So, I mean, the more of that we can get is great. And, regardless of whether it's coming at it from a home or a commercial perspective, people like it. I mean, there's so many people that are getting into the science side of it now that, I think that we'll see a good mix of folks coming in there.
Yeah, and it'll definitely help expand the industry too.
Oh yeah.
But
We could definitely use the art. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
A meat wheel.
Yeah, and that would be awesome. It'd also take a lot of work, but it'd be really cool. And I mean, like you said, some of those applications that we talked about earlier could definitely be repurposed. Because I mean, we always joke about how mead has more common with the beer industry than the wine industry in some cases. I think in a lot of cases, but yeah. So having some of that stuff to repurpose, would make the job a lot easier.
Yeah, sometimes I've even thought that the honey wheel itself is actually really good for mead analysis.
Oh yeah.
As well.
It definitely is. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And maybe integrating that into that flavor, the beer flavor map would be extremely helpful. I think I'll have to look at it again, but I think some of those descriptors are in there, apart from just the general honey descriptor. but yeah.
No, for sure.
I know several judges, they do, when they come and they judge, they bring that honey wheel with them.
Oh yeah, my honey wheel goes with me. Keeps me focused,
Yeah.
So yeah,
it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a honey wheel at every judging table.
Yeah, it really wouldn't be a bad thing at all. Hey, maybe the AMMA can donate honey wheels to the Mazer Cup to have on the tables at the judging.
Yeah, I'll talk to Mina about that on Friday. I got some ideas around that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it might not be a bad thing because there's a lot of folks that don't even realize it's out there, and I think it'll be helpful. But
no, it's actually it is a really big help. Because, I mean, how many times have you tasted something and you're thinking, oh man, that's so familiar, I just can't put my finger on it, and all of a sudden somebody, and you're like, that's it. Now, if you got that honey wheel, that flavor wheel, it becomes a lot easier to kind of start analyzing the different the aspects of the flavor and aroma.
It does, yeah. And I'm loving this idea of the draft lab thing. I'm thinking that we need to maybe chat them up and see if they'd be interested in adding on, functionality on our side of the fence. That could turn into be a really powerful tool for both home and commercial mead makers.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Definitely.
That's something else for our research committee at the AMMA.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I told the when I was doing the sales pitch for the owners, I was like, it's really easy to get palate fatigued when there's only the same 3 people tasting it every time. And I was like, but with this, I can get 10, 18 people to do it. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, it changes the whole paradigm. I mean, honestly, something like this could have the potential to change the face of evaluation altogether because of its capabilities.
Yeah, and one thing I forgot to mention that I started doing with this program is that we have about 10 people on staff, and so we started with the staff, like bartenders, brewers, assistant brewers, some of the owners, but we started with them, and the bartenders really liked it because it helped them sell the product more easily, because they could talk about the different aromas, the different flavors that they get out of this beer. It was easier for them to describe the beer than just making up, whatever description that they made up, whether it be accurate or not. So it gave them some basis for talking about your product. So that's another advantage of having something like this.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's huge.
The more we talk about it, the more I see possibilities here.
I am not paid by Draft Lab.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, you and Sergio with his Monday morning app that he's been talking me up. I told him he ought to just start getting commissions the way he's been chatting it up.
Yeah. Yeah, I was looking at this project management software for the AMMA, which is totally awesome. I fell in love with this. I ended up selling myself. I actually just got it for the meadery.
Yeah, he's got me talked into doing it for God Mead,
everything
too.
down. Yeah, I got everything plotted down for production planning. I mean, shit. Right now we have a good 14 different batches at various levels. I mean, being able to keep track of all that. You have a notes app, but a notes app is only as good as how fast you can flip through the pages. But being able to kind of see everything that you got going on in front of you on one screen is pretty awesome.
Yeah, we use it sounds like a program similar to what we use called Ecos, and so there's like
Ecos.
There is some issues that I have with it, but having a software or some program like that presents you with all that information is so nice.
Oh,
that you don't have to dig through brew logs and whatnot.
Yeah, if you can get it all in one place.
Software. Yeah, I could go on and on about this software.
Don't get him started. We'll be here for another 2 hours. It took me 45 minutes to get him off the phone last night. He could not stop talking about it. It was hilarious.
It's like the capabilities are endless, and it's totally customizable. It's really cool. Anyway, we'll see if it works for the AMA.
Yeah, we'll see if it lives up to its promise for sure. But I'd like the idea. Maybe we could pull together some, a show or maybe even 2 shows with, you guys and other people possibly talking about analysis and sensory and quality control and stuff like that. I think that's a conversation that a lot of people would be interested in hearing.
Yeah. I mean, and for those go-getters at home, I mean, they can do this stuff because before my office got too cluttered and I had to downsize, but I had a yeast bank at home and did plating and stuff like that. So it's you can do it at home and you can do it at the meadery level too. So some of the home brewers might find use out of this as well.
Oh God, yes, there are so many science mead geeks. It's not funny. So yeah, I'm pretty sure we could draw a pretty good crowd with that.
Yeah, well, there's been a couple people on the show that have SO2 titrators at home.
Oh God, yeah.
Those are expensive machines.
I know the equipment some of these guys buy, and it's okay, I've got a hydrometer and a spoon and and a bucket. I don't even have a filter. I just rack and let it settle. I'm old school.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? Those particular individuals are bringing in a lot of medals, and even if they don't enter into competition, they make some crazy stand-up meads.
Yeah, no question that it's definitely helping them to make good mead. Although I would beg to say that some of them would be making excellent mead regardless of their fancy equipment. Some of them are just damn fine mead makers. So and equipment does not make the mead maker, but it doesn't hurt.
I mean, you got people like Bobby. Bobby doesn't even use a hydrometer, right?
Yeah, to say Bobby makes amazing mead, and does it with basic equipment, and he's very intuitive. So
he just
you got both options.
What was that, Haim?
Bobby just intimidates his mead into being good.
Yeah, I think maybe he does. Yeah.
He just wills it to submission.
He just goes all New York on it, and
Yes.
I don't know. Seeing the guy's basement, it's working.
Yeah, but I mean, if you had asked them too, why they bought that, it's with the same kind of answer you'd probably get at a at the commercial level, right? So they're concerned about some sort of issue, and the objective is they want to kind of control it better, and it helps them make a better, more consistent product.
Oh, and sometimes this is just their midlife crisis toys too, instead of a Corvette.
Yeah, so instead of their motorcycle, it's a titrator.
Yeah. I got a 5-barrel system and it's in my garage. Okay, it's not a Corvette, but all right, So, yeah.
I guess my wife jokes about that too. So.
Yeah, boys and their toys. It's all right. It's cool. If it makes you happy and keeps you out of trouble, hey, whatever.
I have 2 microscopes at Melovino, and I use them for X number of weeks, and I'm like, oh wow, this is so cool. Cell counts and watching yeast cells move around and multiply. I'm like, this is totally awesome. I haven't used them since.
Oh, that's unfortunate. That's like one of my critical points at the brewery is doing cell count, especially after we pitch. But I mean, even after I do, there's a couple of dry yeast that we use, and we hydrate them as well. And so that's one thing when I came in, not teaching, but just kind of doing better like yeast handling practices with the dry yeast as opposed to just dumping them in to water, water. But yeah, even dry yeast, I'll do cell counts to make sure, because it also tells me as well, like if there's a lot of dead cells in there that, they didn't handle it very properly, especially if you have multiple people brewing. I know a lot of mead makers, it's, them, the owners, or, one person brewing it, but if you have more than one hand in the pot, like it'll help, track down problems.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then also, what was it? White Labs or Y yeast that has had this issue where there's a particular strain of bacteria or yeast? I think it was actually a yeast.
It was
White
Labs.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So it was
it's in some of their strains that it's been kind of breweries have been having a hell of a time with that.
Well, they got one of the breweries sued them. That was how it kind of hit the papers. Was somebody sued them and it got written up in an article.
Yeah, Left Hand. Left Hand and Bells, I think, right after him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so it's and that's in. I don't know. I could go on about it as well on another thing, but just the quick thing is, it's a Saccharomyces variant they call diastaticus, and it is able to secrete a protein that is able to basically convert the unfermentable sugars into smaller subunits that they can, the yeast can then eat. So though the beers will over attenuate, and it may not be apparent at first because it takes time. And so as these, enzymes and secrete go and eat the unfermentable sugars, then the yeast are going to slowly ferment, and then you get bottle bombs, puffed out cans, exploding cans.
That's not a happy thing. Definitely not.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, there's 2 local breweries here in New Jersey that's happened to as well. Yeah. And that's what ended up coming out to be after they sent it to a lab. It's kind of crazy. It's on the commercial side. Something like that can happen, especially on the brewery side of things. I mean, you're not, no brewery is going to do any absolute filtration or even down to sterile filtration, right? So
rarely.
You're leaving it to luck in some cases unless you're really taking some precautions.
Yeah, some breweries might for particular styles. Like I know there's one brewery here that does like German type beers, and they have a plate and frame, and I think they also got a lenticular recently, but they brew. They have a very large brew house. Yeah, so they'll do your pilsners
as low as maybe 5 or 10 microns only, though.
Yeah, they're mainly just concerned about like the clarity of the beer. Like they're not going down to like sterile filtration or absolute or anything.
Yeah, because even a plate and frame or lenticular, which is, I mean, it's the same filtering method, just in a different format.
Yeah.
It's even going down to sterile it only gets you about 70% effectiveness. So it's, even with that, it wouldn't really help them. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So why yeast stock went up like crazy after that.
I'll bet.
Well, once those two big breweries jumped on, I was like, it's only a matter of time before they all do. Like, everybody's going to do it.
Oh, yeah, the dam broke then they figured that,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and
which
White
I
Lab's
haven't really
small company either. I mean, they have their California location. They also have one in North Carolina, is it? In Asheville?
Left hand?
Yeah. So a couple of breweries.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say a couple of breweries in the Asheville location. They would just go. The brewer at Ethereal, he has family in Asheville, and so he goes to Asheville quite a bit. Some of the breweries down there say like, yeah, we go to their White Labs place there, and we'll get discounted yeast because ever since they've opened it, that their yeast haven't passed QC, so they'll get like discounted yeast with the disclaimer that it may not be, pure.
Yeah.
Oh, they have it. Yeah, they have it all over their website too. If you're signed up, a commercial brewery or meadery, whatever, to buy yeast from them, they have quite a few disclaimers, and it seems to be only on specific strains that they carry as well. It's not on every single thing that they offer.
Yeah, and I noticed that too. Like on their site, they will say like STA1 gene, like PCR identified, that we've identified that this has that glucoamylase gene. So, which is good. I mean, it's that transparency that sucks for them, but good for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, not for sure. All right. Well, I'm sure Vicky wants to wrap things up here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, to say we could keep going, but we are 15 minutes over, and the puppies of the apocalypse are all sitting here looking at me going, Mom, it's 11 o'clock, and you know what happens at 11 o'clock. So I'm not going to say the word because they'll hear me. The hubby's out of town, so I'm responsible for puppy, doing their business. Can't say the OUT word because
Gotcha.
they hear that and things will get really loud online. So the barking will commence.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. I had a really fun time tonight.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for coming on. This is great. I love seeing the behind the scenes stuff like this because science is not my strongest subject. I learned seat of the pants mead making, so I'm kind of learning as I go from the people who for science is something they're good at, So, it's kind of fun to learn more about that and to be able to provide that for other people. So, and I will be looking at you when we roll out the AMMA speaker apps to put something in.
Yeah. Well, I will say I'll leave with this last one little tidbit that I used to tell my students that they would talk about like, oh, science is a lot of memorizing. It's so hard. And I was like, well, Richard Feynman had a quote. He'd say like, basically science is just about how to not fool yourself, and you're the easiest to fool. So
yeah.
That's basically what it is.
I started out as
That's
biology.
a way of thinking.
I started out in biology in college and rapidly discovered that really where my head was better at was in business. That's just, so once my advisors convinced me of that, then, my grades got a lot better. But,
all right.
So cool. But yeah, thank you for coming on. And, we may, if we do a show that, digs more into, the science of mead and that, and that kind of thing and sensory evaluation and all that, definitely like to have you come back if that's all right.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's been great to have you.
What was that, Hamish?
It's been great to have you tonight. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, man.
We've got
Yeah.
poor international connections tonight for some reason. We don't know if it's sunspots or what's going on, but yeah. And Sergio, thanks for coming in to be a guest host, and you know,
No problem, man.
once you
No
got
problem.
going, man, it rolled. It's great.
Yeah. Well, I was trying not to steal, his thunder, man. This is his show. I'm just here as partaker in the event.
Well, I knew once you guys got to talking shop that it would go, and that was kind of the intention, was to let you really, kind of showcase what you're doing there, Justin. And Sergio knows a lot.
Yeah.
He knows more right questions to ask than I do when it comes to that. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks again, man. Y'all have a good rest of your night.
Yeah, you too.
You too.
All right.
All right.
All
Night,
right.
Justin.
Thanks.
Bye. And some of you may hear the puppy starting to whine because they heard me say the BYE word. So we're just going to roll right into the end notes here. On upcoming stuff, July 28th, Etowah Meadery is having live music by Lindsay Beth Harper. And then we've got a whole list of Mead Day celebrations, and we'll probably have more next week. But August 4th, Hopcat in Royal Oak, Michigan is doing a Mead Day celebration with mead from half a dozen different meaderies in the Detroit area. August 4th, the Arizona Mead and Cider Festival with 4 or 5 meaderies in Arizona and surrounding areas. August 4th and 5th, the Bee Nectar Palooza, which is actually the Ferndale Palooza, charity event, an international beer, cider, and mead festival in Ferndale. Definitely worth looking at if you are anywhere in that area. August 5th, Enlightenment Wines in New York is doing Mead Day with 5 New York meaderies at their Honey's Bar in Brooklyn. August 3rd to 5th, Sergio's got Melavino Mead Day weekend. 7 new releases, including a semi-sweet strawberry rosé and the return of Midnight Jack and Murder of Crows. Woohoo! I'm out of Midnight Jacks. And then we're pushing one out here because I just had to put it in here. August 25th, Bronto Mead in Southern California is providing the mead for a weed and mead party. So for those of you that are going, oh my God, weed is legal in California, so they can do this. So we can all sit over here and be jealous because we live in states that don't allow that kind of stuff. If you've got an event you'd like us to mention on Got Mead Live, just drop me an email at gotmeadlive@gotmead.com and let me know, and we'll get it up on the show for you. So, and upcoming guests, we've got Kylie Gwynn from Mountain Rose Herbs next week. That's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to that. And then Sam Kleichman from Big Lost Meadery up in Wyoming. So, and then, of course, after that, I will be hiring my butt off to Australia from August 11th to 28th to go hang out with Hamish and the Australia crowd to tour around and visit meaderies out there. So that's what we got. We ain't got no more. So we shall,
right.
Yeah. So night, everybody that's listening, and gentlemen.
Good night.
Good night, all. Sorry about the engine.
Okay, see you guys next
night.
week. Same bat time, same bat channel.